Welcome, everybody. Hello. Thanks so much for being here. This is Spirit Matters coming at you live from New York, your daily spiritual check-in with the Bhakti Center. And my name is Dal Gurunga, and I'm here with my co-host this week and co-host in life in general, my wife, Rasika Gopi. She was with us yesterday, going to be with us here this week. How you doing, Rasika?
I'm doing well. Yeah. Excited for another chat, getting things moving.
Getting things moving. Come on, let's move. Yesterday we were talking, you shared a little bit about your story, which I
Oh,
appreciated. And I
yeah.
think that people had the opportunity to kind of hear and I think we were looking at the idea of I think a question where maybe ended was kind of like, what was your first spiritual challenge? Because I think what happened was immediately people thought that we're just going to come and start talking about relationships. It's like, my wife's on the call this week. What do you want to talk about? Tell us about your marriage. How do you make it work? What do spiritual relationships look like? And we're like, oh, we're figuring that out still. But I think there was also a lot of correlation to because spiritual life is a relationship. Also, we're
Yeah.
building a relationship with God, with higher power, with ourselves, with other people. And I think in bhakti, spiritual practice is less about following a set of rules and more about committing to a process to bring us closer to the Supreme Person. And I think also in relationships, it's less about following a set of rules and more about trying to really be attuned to another person and learn what it means to grow in myself and learn more about that other person and kind of like the unpredictabilities of what that's going to look like, and kind of like not throwing away, but becoming less attached to my expectations of how I think. Because I think a lot of times we fall in love with the idea of somebody, and then what happens is we don't give space for that person to actually be who they are. And I think the same is true for our spiritual lives, that we come to spiritual life with an idea of what spirituality is supposed to be and how it's going to smooth out everything in my life. And as soon as things get a little hard or a little uncomfortable, or the lavender eye pillow stops working, or the scent goes away, I think, oh, like this yoga studio is not for me, or this retreat or whatever it is, and blah, blah, blah. And so you were talking a little bit about your story, and I asked, what was your first big spiritual challenge? And I remember you didn't give a specific example, but it was more of like a general
Yeah.
sort of feeling. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I think maybe a broader theme in my spiritual life is like coming to terms with being attracted to this path that has these really high ideals, and really is a process of putting your ego through the ringer and letting it dissolve, and unearthing your true innate being, which is this selfless, loving, forgiving, tolerant, compassionate spirit soul. And just that journey, though, is a long process, at least for me, and it doesn't happen overnight. And so we were talking about like the honeymoon phase, when you're bright-eyed and excited, and enlightenment seems just like a step away. And not that you might say it like that, but it just seems so close, and you're so hopeful and excited. But then, life hits you. The honeymoon phase of spiritual life ends, and just coming to terms with how far you have to go, and how, yeah, it's really hard to apply those high ideals in the day-to-day moments.
Yeah, I think so, very much so. And I think that one of the questions that was coming yesterday also was the idea of like keeping Krishna in the center of relationship and keeping God in the center of relationship. And I think what that looks like is when we start reminding ourselves more that it's not about just me. This isn't about just me. And I think in our spiritual life also, I mean, it very much is about us, in the sense that we want to be growing and experiencing like positivity, and we want to experience fulfillment and joy. But that I'm actually like I think relationship inherently means I'm no longer thinking about just me. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'm no
Yeah.
longer thinking about just me. And I think that's the hardest thing about relationship. And I think sometimes the hardest part about spiritual life also is because spiritual life inherently, you know, when we talk about bhakti, it's not just about love, it's not just about joy, it's not just about fulfillment. It's about that love and joy and fulfillment experienced through service, you know. And I always quote that phrase from Rabindranath Tagore, who said that I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and discovered that life was service. I acted, and behold, service is joy. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that when we approach life, whether it's spiritual life or relationship, from the mood of what's in it for me, we're naturally going to become very frustrated, because it's a false assumption that everything is meant to revolve around me. And it's kind of like we're called the Bhakti center. You know why? Because it's like the idea of pulling ourselves out of the center. And we live so much of our life, like kids, for example. Kids are extraordinarily egocentric. Our dog is extraordinarily egocentric.
It totally is.
He's completely egocentric. And it's not even like, we'll be sitting on the couch. Like this morning, we had like a little moment where we like needed a hug, and we gave ourselves a hug, and like he's looking over and just like, do I need to get in this? Do I need to like insert myself here? Like, and it's not even like, when I say egocentric, I don't just mean like selfish and in like this negative critical way, but like the idea of just really genuinely, out of ignorance, really thinking that the world revolves around me.
Mhm.
And kids naturally think that way. Everything revolves around me. I don't like what I'm getting, I'm going to cry. I'm going to disturb this entire airplane because I don't have my Cheerios. Like whatever it might be. And it's just because I just think the world revolves around me. And I think that as we go into adults, just because, the passage of time doesn't make me an adult. I think it's a big millennial thing these days of like, we see those memes that's like, we find ourselves looking around wondering like, where are the adults, realizing, oh dear God, I'm the adult. I'm
Yeah.
the adult. Like who made that decision? Who allowed that to happen? And I think that just because time passes, I'm in my 20s now, my 30s now, my 40s now, I still might be very much operating the way I was as a child, thinking that things are supposed to revolve around me. And I think relationships is what pulls us into maturities, which pulls us into adulthood,
Yeah.
which pulls us out of the center of myself, to realize that, what, like, yes, my thoughts and feelings are important. I have value, but I need to be able to learn how to exist in relationship with other people. And I think that is the real, I think, bump, the almost like the rite of passage towards sustainable relationships, towards sustainable spiritual practice, where my spiritual practice is about giving to God and others, and my
Mhm.
relationship is about learning to live in service and harmony with another person.
Yeah, that's all so beautiful. And you're the Gita scholar. What's that verse about? How a devotee is actually working tirelessly for the welfare of all, like the friend to all. And
Mm,
um, so yeah, that's so integral to at least the bhakti path. Is it's not, spirituality is not about just our own liberation. And I think sometimes that's what's going on in those beginning moments when we come to spiritual life, because we're like, finally there's an answer to all
mm,
my material and problems. It's a spiritual solution, and we get so excited and enthused by the idea to end suffering for ourselves, because we've just become to a point, well, I know for myself, where we've experienced so much suffering within our lives and all around us, and there's this, it's like this silver bullet. But I love that the bhakti path is truly the highest, in the sense that it not only involves your own enlightenment, salvation, and liberation, but actually it's really refined and matured and deepened when it goes that step further and extend, and you feel the devotees move to extend and to give bhakti to as many people as possible so that they too can have that realization and transformation of heart. And so it's not, spirituality on the bhakti path is not all about me, whereas, prior to coming to the bhakti path, I was deep into Buddhism, which is a very individual kind of path. It's very self-reflective, and in a sense, you can kind of do it on your own. And so this, I love that bhakti, is so communal based, and it's that we aren't an island, and that we have to have each other, and that's where the real magic and blessings can pour from, when we share bhakti with others. And that happens through relationship. And the other thing that was coming to my mind is, like, nothing in this world is easy. Everything's hard.
I'm not easy.
Well, Srila Prabhupada would say, like, we're all working like cats and dogs, trying to.
Our dog does not work very hard. I'm not sure if Prabhupada knew our dog, maybe had other dogs in mind.
Yeah, but like, you know what I mean? What is the common phrase he says? We're just all working.
Yeah. I don't think there's a specific instance, but he would use that often, talking about like how hard we're working in the material world for things that aren't actually even what we're looking for.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time and energy I mean, it's interesting, even the idea of like of being a servant, right? Like we
Yeah.
talk about, there's in the biography of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when one of his followers, Sanatana Goswami, asked the question, like, who am I? And he answers, Jivara Swarupa Hoy Krishna Nitya Das, that we are all eternally the servant of that supreme absolute truth. And it kind of feels like a little like uncomfortable, like, but the reality is that the Dharma, the nature of the soul, is to be subservient, is to serve. Bob Dylan wrote the song, it may be the devil, it may be the Lord, but you're going to have to serve somebody. And I think that what Prabhupada is referencing there is like, we are all serving something,
Yeah.
whether it's our mind, whether it's our body, whether it's my addictions, whether it's my reputation, whether it's my insecurity. How many of us are serving our insecurities? Like,
Yeah.
how many of us are actually just, so much of my life is just serving my insecurities, serving my fears, serving my ambitions, right? And I'm not even saying that like negative or good or bad. It's just a reality that like we exist in the service of something, and it's natural for us. And so I think Prabhupada in that references was trying to point out that like we are working so dang hard. Are we ever stopping to ask, what am I really working for?
Yeah, it's like Dhruva Maharaj, at the end, when he, after his like extreme austerities, and he's wanting to do is become more powerful and wealthy than his father, he ends up, through his meditation, by the grace of his guru, seeing Krishna, and realizing in that moment, when he has this divine vision, how everything else was just broken glass. He described it as all those material ambitions and pursuits were like broken glass, and that the real wealth and jewel and treasure is found in just our spiritual pursuits. And so, yeah, just going back to what I was saying earlier about how like everything, whether it's a material or spiritual pursuit, it's hard. And so it just, anything in this world, relationships, your career, raising a family, all of the above is going to have its challenges. It just comes down to who do you want to work hard for? Like you said, who do you want to give your time and energy and sweat and tears for? Do you want to do it for building castles in sand in this material world? That's all, ultimately not eternally going to do anything for you. It's going to disappear at the end of this lifetime. You can't take it with you. Or, do you want to build up that spiritual bank account? Like Srila Prabhupada would say, like any little investment you make, even though it's hard on the spiritual path, it can feel like you're just moving just like the needle just a hair, it's still of tremendous value because it's eternal, and it's because it's taking steps towards Krishna, which doesn't disappear at the end of this lifetime. You know, Krishna assures Arjuna at the end of the 6th chapter, is it that? And I think of this all the time, like, or is this the end of the 6th chapter, the riven cloud? You
Yeah, it's
know,
at
when
the end of the sixth. It's the end of the 6th chapter.
yeah, and so Arjun is concerned. He's like, well, I have this like doubt in my heart, Krishna. What happens, you know, if for a failed spiritualist, for a failed transcendentalist, somebody who gives up their material pursuits and throws himself into a spiritual path, and yet they come up short. That it worries me. It feels like I might end up in this limbo space where I'm like a riven cloud, or this kind of like solo cloud, wayward cloud that's just drifting into nothingness, into an abyss. And I haven't done anything materially because I gave that up, but spiritually I haven't seen success. And you know, Krishna then immediately dispels that doubt and says that, you know, you don't have to fear that any advancement on the spiritual path is eternally to your credit. And then if you can't attain it in this lifetime, rest assured that you'll come back in your next lifetime, and you'll be situated, whether that be in a certain family environment, or somehow I will find you through my devotees to rekindle that spark and continue that flame of bhakti in your heart. And I take so much shelter in those verses, because I often feel like that riven cloud, you know. And I it's like I have to remember Krishna's words, because I keep having that doubt like Arjun.
Mm.
And I remember that the verses that follow that, Krishna is very yeah, maybe we could read them. I don't know if you have them pulled
Yeah,
up.
I've been pulling it all up.
Okay, great. Take
I'm appreciating so much of the you're talking about me being like a Gita scholar, which I'm not, but I do have Google Scholar, which by the way is an actual thing. Do you know Google Scholar is a thing? It's like a search engine for journals in
Yes, I used
academics
to use that back in my
back in
academic
the academia days.
days.
So you were quoting all these verses that I didn't know, but I was Googling them and finding them. And so I'm appreciating just the different references about how you're relating it to the life of Dhruva Maharaj, this verse in this place in the 6th chapter of the Gita. And also earlier you referenced this verse from the 5th chapter of the Gita, which I didn't know where that was, but I looked it up, and you were talking about engaged and working for the welfare of all living beings. This is
Oh
from
yeah.
the fifth chapter of the Gita, verse 25. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. And which I find so interesting about this verse is because it's talking about working for the welfare of other living beings, which I think sometimes, you know, the idea of spiritual burnout, or the idea of compassion
Mm.
fatigue, or the idea of neglecting our needs in the pursuits of trying to serve others, or people pleasing, etc., kind of actually can get obfuscated in a spiritual path, that we think it's spiritual to deny myself in the service of others. But the previous verse, just from this in the same chapter, the previous verse, Krishna
Mm.
says, one whose happiness is within, who's active and rejoices within,
Yes.
and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. They're liberated in the supreme and ultimately attain the supreme. And then the next verse is those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within. So it's like you're well situated internally, and then from that place, always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and are freed from all sins, achieve liberation in the supreme. So um I was thinking also in terms of relationships, part of the idea of being able to engage healthfully in a
Hopefully, hopefully.
healthful manner
We should not be paired up. We need like
We need like a third. Well, we're supposed to get a word nerd. That was one of our is word nerd politically correct? Am I allowed to say that? Am I allowed to say word nerd, or do we need something
I,
more reverential?
I think nerds like to be
A word
kids.
scholastic associate. We need a linguistic
Yes.
associate. We need a linguistic associate on our show. Um, but basically, I think that the idea also is a big service in relationship is taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
I think a
Yeah.
big part of our service is taking care of ourselves. And I think also if we were to go back, as you were talking about a riven cloud, because it's there in the 6th chapter of the Gita, like what happens if I kind of like leave my material life behind and I don't exactly like pick up spiritual life the way I'm supposed to, and I kind of stumble and I find myself sort of uh like a riven cloud you were talking about.
Exactly. It's pretty
um you
perfect.
know where do I go? And I think that there's a sense of never give up the things that nourish you. um Never neglect the ways in which you need to take care of yourself, and make sure that whether you're in an intimate relationship with somebody, whether you're pursuing a career, whether you're entering a spiritual practice, make sure along the way that you're holding on to the things that genuinely nourish you. And I think that because we learn so much about spiritual life, the idea of knowledge, the idea of awareness, and I think that knowledge means becoming more aware of what are the things that actually nourish me. Because there are things that I think I'm doing for my well-being, but actually just drain me, you know that
Yeah.
actually like this habit, this interest, this thing that I do that I think, laying on the couch at 11 o'clock at night, binge watching a TV show in order to unwind before, at the end of the day, is, sticking whatever in my mouth is going to like, that's how I nourish myself. But the reality is like, I feel like it's like I don't know if people know, but like I've been off of sugar for the last 3 weeks, 3 months,
3 months. Yeah.
3 months, ever since right before Christmas. And we were visiting my family in California, and yeah, no more popsicles, guys. I gave them up. I have a picture. I got to put it on there. I had like that. I had to like, there was a mountain of frozen treats that I had to empty onto our kitchen counter, and I had to dispose of. Most of them were half empty, but basically what happened was, you're in California, and there's like a health food store there, kind of like a version of what Whole Foods or whatever it was, and we were looking for vegan treats, and I found some vegan cupcakes, and I was eating a vegan cupcake on the couch watching a Christmas movie, and I just remember this feeling at one point of like, I feel like a cupcake. Like I just feel
I
like this.
remember that moment
I
because
just
I thought the
feel like this.
cupcakes were gross and you were eating it.
They were, but it was like the only option that we had. We were in the middle of Southern California, and like,
Yeah.
in like a yoga desert, and like
It's one
and
of
like
those moments where you're just desperate and you realize it's just purely like that mental emotional imbalance is just making you reach for think like you don't even want it, but you have to have something.
Yeah. And so I just, at a certain point, it's like the things that we think are actually nourishing us are actually our coping mechanisms, which may or may not be nourishing us to the us in the truest sense. And so I think a big part of spiritual development, maturity, is learning and being aware of what actually nourishes us. And then being able to have a sense of personal responsibility and conviction to making sure that we're taking care of ourselves in a way that allows us to show up in other people's lives in a positive and contrib- contributive way.
I don't know about that one.
Contributive, in a way that
In a
allows us to be our best.
contributing way.
Contributing way,
I
maybe.
think that is more accurate.
Maybe. And so anyways, all that back to say is a big part of our service to others in relationships is also taking care of ourselves.
Yes. Although I am of a different mind, like, you hear it all the time, like you can't love another until you love yourself, or, isn't that what you hear all the time? Isn't that like a common thing out in the world?
You
Like,
can't love others if you don't love yourself.
or you can't receive love if you don't love yourself. things like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I hear that, and I think there's some truth to that, but it's also not like I hear that nuanceness, and
Yeah. And so I guess what I was going to say on that is I do think that we can continue. I think it comes out in the wash through, and that's why bhakti is um so effective and truly transcendental. It's like inconceivable, because like in the process of serving another, you uncover yourself, and that's where the greatest self-satisfaction lies, in service to others. It's in the giving that we receive. And so I think it is both. Like, you have to have a healthy sense of self identity and esteem, and that of course needs to be there. But I do think that it goes back to that quote you had earlier, where you um, Ravindra Tagore, is that who you were quoting earlier?
Tagore, Tagore,
um,
Rabindranath Tagore.
Tagore, yeah.
Yeah.
And how you find yourself, or you lose yourself in the service, but there you find yourself, kind of. It's one of those paradoxical things. So I think that there can be yeah, it has to be a mix of both. Like, yes, tending to yourself, but not becoming so self-consumed. And because suffering, I know, but for my own self, suffering can be a really self-absorbing thing. And sometimes you just have to get out of your own way by seeing from a higher perspective, and that sometimes just takes you giving yourself your time, your energy to another, or to others. And yeah, just getting out of that funk of living in your head so much. And
Mm.
so yeah, I think that there's a tremendous amount of self-care that's found, and also giving of yourself to others, not in the like martyrdom, the the people pleasing, killing yourself just to um, yeah, just to self-sacrificing yourself. But I do think it's so essential for us to find ways, either every day or every week, or ways that we can give our time and energy to others. I think that's why, like, the ashram of grihastha ashram, of being married to another, or raising a family, it's like you're immediately taken out of the center. And I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier in the podcast about, like, you realize you grow up quite quickly, and you realize what love is really about, and how you have to get out of the center. And that's where love really comes, the true love, real love, deep mature love, comes from recognizing you aren't in the center.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think that, yeah, I don't think it's one or the other. I think that there's a
Yeah.
combination of, spoken from two people who really struggle to take care of ourselves. Um, so
You
we're doing
do
better.
great. Okay, you make it sound like we are
No, we
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 are like barely hanging out. I think we do pretty
we do
good.
great, and you're an Ayurvedic counselor, and you keep us on track more so than me.
I
But
think
I
you have
think
like a vision of how we were, in the first few years of marriage, but I think we do pretty good.
I think we do great. I think that what we both lean towards, I'll speak for myself, leaning towards sacrificing my own self for others in a way that can sometimes lead to resentment. And I think that's the thing
Oh
that we're
yeah.
looking at. Because I'm not saying that, like, oh, don't serve other people. I'm just saying that oftentimes it's not uncommon for
Hmm.
people, either in relationships or in spiritual life, to find themselves in a place of, I gave so much, but I feel so empty.
Yeah. Oh,
And I think,
definitely. In
and I
that
think,
way,
I think that's because we neglected to take care of ourselves. Not
yeah,
we, meaning you and me, but just in general.
yeah,
And so I'm thinking
yeah,
that the best thing that we can do sometimes for another is take care of ourselves.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah. And that's our time today, guys. Thank you so much. We hit our time. We're actually a couple minutes over, and we're going to turn it over to Kimberly, who's our wrap it up acharya. take our takeaways. There's a lot going on in the chat, including someone's petition for me to publish a dictionary, which I'm not sure how well that would be. I won't call it a dictionary. I'll just call it Dial's word book. But Kimberly, what kind of takeaways you got for us, and what are we walking away with?
We're walking away with it's less about following a set of rules, but more about committing to a process. Relationships and spiritual life inherently means I'm no longer thinking about just me. Service is joy. Extend bhakti so others can have transformation of heart. Stop to ask, what am I really working hard for? Build that spiritual bank account. Any investment on the spiritual path is eternally to our credit, and hold on to what nourishes us. Lots of takeaways today.
Lots of takeaways today. Thank you so much. Rasika, what are you walking away with? What's your closing word?
My closing word, just excited to come back tomorrow. And yeah, I'm always, I don't know how this is all going for everyone. So yeah, if you have any questions that you want to help ground us, because the two of us can just go on tangents, I think.
I think it's great. I think maybe I paint a picture that we are not taking care of ourselves as much as we are, and you're painting a picture that we're not, that we're all over the place sounding cuckoos, which we probably are a little bit, but I think it's beautiful. I love what you're saying. I love what you're sharing, and I think that there's a lot of really great gems. You're very coherent, and a lot of references from places all over the place in the Gita and in the Bhagavatam, and so I really appreciate
Well,
that.
if there's anyone out there that wants to give us a theme or topic for tomorrow, please let us know. Because otherwise, this is what you're gonna get.
This is what you get, guys. This is what you get. But I really appreciate it. And walking away with very much the idea of I really appreciated just the reflection that just like it's not always about me. It doesn't have to always be about me completely. Like there is an element of taking care of myself and knowing my needs and etc. But I think a lot of my real stresses and anxieties and doubts and concerns come when I've just become so self-absorbed in terms
Yeah.
of like, what are people thinking of me, and what does this say about me, and all these things. And it's just like, wow, I don't have to, like, I think we were talking the other day about like when we used to give presentations like in high school or junior high
Yeah.
or sixth grade. And I was like, were you ever nervous giving presentations? And I was like, I remember being in junior high thinking like, nobody is paying attention to anybody's presentation because everyone is so freaking worried about their own. Like if they already gave their presentation, they're not listening to you because they don't care anymore. And if they haven't given their own presentation, when you're up there, like they don't even remember because they're so stressed about their own. And it's like we're all giving our junior high presentation in life. And the reality is that nobody is listening to yours. It's not
Oh my
about you
God,
as
I
much as you
love
think,
that.
you
I
think it
love
is.
that.
And so and there's not as much writing on it. Like there's this thought of like, if I don't give this high school presentation about how a light bulb works, like I'm never going to find joy and love and fulfillment. Like my life's going to fail. I'm not going to get into the college that I want. I'm not going to get a job. I'm never going to find relationship. I'm never going to find love. And so we put so much on it, and I don't think that we really need to as much. And so I take a little bit of the pressure off by not so much about me. All right. Appreciate you guys so much. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Rasika. Thank you all for being here, for being with us. Please go leave us, write to us, 5-star reviews, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, rate and review. And if you have any questions, reflections, thoughts, write to us at spiritmatters@bhakticenter.org. We love hearing from you. Thank you guys all so much. Please be well, take care, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.